This is a plan of the field that we're interested in, where there are supposedly some Germans buried. And the field is called Schwabsko Groblie, which means basically Jerry's Cemetery, which is a pretty good sign for us. Hopefully we're going to find what we're looking for. There's a first body lying on top on his stomach, and the body's been smashed by the tractors plowing the fields. He still has his identification tag that's apparently a Cossack cavalry unit. And now here in the field there's supposed to be about 20 coffins buried. That's wood from the coffins that we can see. Here we're digging up the first body from the coffin. And on his finger he has a death head ring, which is a pretty rare find. Here on this soldier's arm there's these pieces of rubber that look like they were probably a tourniquet, but we didn't find any wounds on the actual bones. That might be a cause of death though. The skull is broken. These bodies were buried in coffins, so some of the bones moved after they were buried and the body decomposed in the coffin. So we just found the jaw now that wasn't in its proper place. And you can see it has some silver teeth, which is quite typical of these German soldiers of the time. This is the second body, and we can see the pieces of wood from the coffin here. And when you lift the wood away, underneath you can see the bones. So this is the arm bone here for the left arm. This is the second body, well, the third body actually, but the second one in the coffin. He seems to have a fractured femur here on the right side, up here. And in the neck area, the identification tag is still in position, so broken in half, which means the Germans probably knew about him being killed. And we'll clean it later and see what's written on it. This is the femur here, and that does look like an old fracture, and it would have been a serious wound at the time, so that might be the cause of death of this soldier. This is the fourth body now, and we just found the guy's identification tag. Unfortunately, it's one of those late war iron ones, so it's probably going to be completely impossible to read. So this is the fourth body for today. We don't see any major wounds. The skull was broken by our machine, by our excavator. And as we saw before, he has this iron ID tag that probably will not be readable. It's a bit hard to say, but at the back of the skull there were some old fractures and there's a piece of bone missing, so that might be a cause of death, a shrapnel wound or something. It's hard to say though, because the bones aren't in such good condition. This is the fifth body, so this one was destroyed by the excavator. Only the head and the legs are left in place. The head has, well, the teeth. The head has interesting teeth repairs, as you can see. So this fifth body had been damaged by the excavator. And I came and checked out the pile of dirt with the metal detector, and We found his ID tag here as well. It's made of aluminum. We can't read anything on it right now, but hopefully it'll clean up properly. With the hand it's better. Now you're gonna... Still in good condition. Can you see something written? Yeah. Perfect. Some ersatz battalion, eh? This is the 6th body, and it also has its identification tag. This is the 6th body we're digging up today. It was also damaged by the excavator, so it's hard to say anything about the wounds. The skull is broken, but the most important part is that the identification tag is here. Dobro, i što ste vidjeli tu kad ste imali 5 godine?
Da, išao sam sa djedom u polje na njih, sa zaprežnim kolima, mislim. Oni su onda išli, vozili, raditi, sa konjima smo radili.
Da.
I mene on vozio. I onda smo tu stali i gledali, oni su nje dovažali s kamionom sa ceradom, natkli normalno. I tu su nje postavljali, grobnica je bila tako iskopana i postavljali je unutra. Mi smo tu stali i gledali, ali nisu nam ništa prigovorili, tako da sam je očevidac toga. Mislim, eto, hvala Bogu, živ sam, doživio sam te godine, a dobro sam zapamtio to, ne? Da, tako da, to je bilo to, evo. Eto.
This is the 7th body. He was also wearing an identification tag, once again made of iron, so it's probably not going to be readable. We haven't really seen any obvious wounds, but there's a whole arm missing, but that might have been the excavator because it dug pretty deep in this place. So this guy has a wallet that we're going to open now to see what's inside. There's already an Italian coin. There's some paper. There's a condom. Some more coins.
Doktori, šta ste našli novčanik? Da.
Kondom, novac.
Kondom.
Da, pločice nema.
No, not yet.
This is the 8th body that we find today, and this one is the most interesting so far when it comes to seeing wounds on him, because you can see that on the left leg there's 2 tourniquets that have been put into place, and the leg is smashed in both those locations. There was a shrapnel fragment here that we found when we were digging, and there's also a tourniquet in place on the left leg, that pink stuff you can see, and the lower leg is smashed completely. Apparently the foot is actually missing. So this guy would have probably bled out, even though a total of 3 tourniquets were put in place by the medical team or by his friends. Other than that, we didn't find anything particular, and no identification tag, unfortunately. These are the tourniquets once we've taken them out of the ground. So it's just a piece of rubber that went all around the leg. They've taken the bodies out. This 8th body with all those wounds in the legs also had an identification tag. It's not really readable right now, but it should be after cleaning. Removing the legs, there's also a watch here. There might be something written on it, we'll see. There it is. That was its protective case, and that's the watch itself. This is the 9th body. We didn't find any objects on him, no wounds and no identification tag for the moment. As we were removing the bones here, we also found the ID tag of this 9th soldier. It's interesting because the number is very low, 3, which means that it's very likely that this was a high-ranking officer in the unit. He would have been one of the first to be issued with a dog tag. This is the 10th body found in this gravesite. This one has a double fracture here on the right forearm, and you can see that the doctors or the medical personnel tried to put on some sort of a stabilizer to prevent the fractures from moving. Other than that, there's nothing found with the body so far, no buttons, no ID tag or anything like that. Just as we took out those fractured arm bones, it just happens to be that that's where the ID tag is. So we're going to take it out of the ground now. It's in almost perfect condition, it seems like. What does it say? Infantry Ersatzbataillon something. Now when we put all these pieces of fractured bone together, you can see that they all fit together perfectly and nothing is actually missing. So no shrapnel fragment or bullet went through the bone. Interesting. This is the 11th body found in the grave. He has his dog tag in the position where it should be. And the leg is very interesting because you see that there's a stabilizer placed along the whole leg, and there's a fractured femur with remains of a tourniquet, and you can see there's a round hole which gives the impression that it's probably a bullet wound that completely smashed the femur. We'll see it a bit better when we exhume it in a minute. This is the femur once we've taken it out of the ground. So as you can see, there's an entrance hole. There's no exit at the back. And when I was cleaning it, there's this piece of metal that's... can you show the other side? This piece of metal came out, so this might be the piece of shrapnel that caused the hole. It's difficult to be sure, of course. It's about the right size. This is the 12th body. We didn't manage to find any wounds on him. There's just some damage caused by our excavator. And there's no identification tag for the moment. This one was kind of interesting. They put his hands over his chest. While we dug him out, we did find the ID tag, but it's completely destroyed, so I doubt we'll be able to identify this guy. Here we found something extremely interesting. At the feet of the 12th body, we found a piece of femur that had been sawed off, so obviously an amputated leg, and then we noticed that there's actually an amputated tibia and part of the femur buried under the body. So you can see that this is the foot here, this is the tibia, and here it's all smashed into small pieces, and then up here there's the amputated femur. So they must have seen the wound was too severe and they sawed the leg off. You can actually see the saw marks, and you can see that the surgeon sawed 90% and then the last piece just snapped off on its own. So somewhere in Germany there must be a guy with a leg missing, and this is his leg right here. There's also a small piece of shrapnel that was found near the wounded area. As we dig these pieces out, you can see there's another piece of shrapnel stuck on the tibia here. So the guys are digging up the 12th body now. I mean the 13th body, which was the 12th in the row who was actually buried deep down. And we've already found the dog tag, which is in very good condition. It'll be perfectly readable after being cleaned. It was way down beside his hip. This is the 13th body. He's going to be a bit hard to film because of the shade. He had his ID tag right down beside his hip. It's still in very good condition. And then here down at his legs he has multiple fractures and the remains of these stabilizers here that you can see. So there's a fracture of the right tibia up here, and there's also fractures of the left tibia and also a stabilizer down here behind the left tibia. So it looks like both his lower legs were broken. With him we also found these two stars that shows he was an Unteroffizier, so a non-commissioned officer. So when we put the fragments of the right tibia together, you can see there's a piece of shrapnel that went in and caused the fracture of the whole bone. The other one is a bit too damaged to try to just reconstruct it like that in the field, but obviously it was also hit. Now we're starting to dig the second row of these graves in this field cemetery, and some of the guys are buried in coffins. You can see the remains of wood pretty well, and we're finding a lot of nails from the coffins. This is now the 14th body we've excavated in this field cemetery, and this one also has remains of a stabilizer around his right leg, like some of the others did. And when we look closer, we can see that there's a fracture up here high on the right femur. So that would have been a very serious wound and a very painful wound back then. It was very difficult to treat. We'll take a closer look at it when we take the fragments of bone out of the ground. As we exhumed the bones of this 14th body, we just found the identification tag. Is it readable, or? Oh yeah, looks like it's in good condition, eh? And we can also look in more details at the hip wound. It seems like that would probably have been a bullet that would have done that. Exited from the front and exited from the back. Oh, sorry, entered from the front and exited from the back, and caused that pretty horrible fracture that killed this soldier. The identification tag made of aluminum, so it will clean up very nicely and enable the identification, hopefully. As we're digging up this 14th body, taking his bones out of the ground, this ring came out still on his finger. Probably has some family initials on it or something like that. Looking at this ring more carefully, it's really hard to see, but it says Athens, and there's a drawing of the Parthenon. So it shows that this soldier had been in Greece before ending up here in Croatia. We've just started digging up body number 15. There's an identification tag between his legs, a complete one. And also found with the ID tag, there's this Greek coin So this is a different body from the one who had the Greek ring, but as we can see, a lot of these guys were coming up from Greece to end up in Croatia. So we've just found the dog tag and coin, and here you can see there's a ring still on the finger. And this is probably something medical related to a fracture he has. We'll see it afterwards. You want to take the ring?
Sure.
Looks like a wedding ring, yeah? Yeah, it has some stuff written inside. So this guy got married in 1934. We did find a wedding ring with a wedding date in 1937, not 34 like I said before. And he had his dog tag and a coin from Greece. And you see that on his right arm he had some kind of stabilizer, but we can't see any fractures on the bones. So maybe he just had a flesh wound on his right arm. We didn't find any wounds anywhere else. This is the 16th body. He had an identification tag. It was in bad condition. And other than that, there's nothing particularly notable about him. No wounds, no rings, no equipment. This is the 17th body, and we just started excavating him, and we can already see an identification tag. Can you try to clean it? See if it's still in good condition? Oh yeah, it's like almost brand new. So this guy should be able to be identified without any issues. His number is still there, the blood group is still there, the unit is still there, so it should work out. This is still the same body, and you see there's an officer's rank here, the collar tab. It seems to be green in color. We're still digging up this body number 17, which is an officer. We can already see he has fractures on the right arm here, and where his pocket must have been, there's 2 white condoms that are unused apparently. So we finished exhuming the 17th body. We're going to take him out of the earth now. He had his identification tag, as we saw, those officers' badges. And here on the left arm you can see that there's fractures of the proximal ulnar radius and of the humerus as well. You can see here all the fractures. So all the forearm bones are broken, probably by shell fragments. So this is the 18th body now. We haven't found a dog tag on this one. We might find it when we take the bones out of the ground, and we also haven't found any wounds. The legs are damaged, but that was done by the excavator. And up here everything seems to be more or less intact. We haven't excavated the skull properly yet. We might find a wound there. So we just started excavating this body, and it looks like there's a shrapnel wound here in the forehead, and just in the chest area we found the identification tag, still in very good condition for a pioneer battalion. So this is the 19th body. We did find the dog tag before, and there seemed to be a shrapnel wound on the forehead here, and other than that there's nothing particular, but a shrapnel wound could be enough to explain his death, of course. So this is the 20th body that we've found in this part of the cemetery. There's been no identification tag on this one, but there's the whole left arm is missing with the broken left clavicle visible, and the legs were damaged by the excavator, but we can still see that both femurs have old fractures on them, and one of the tibias also has a fracture. So it seems that this guy had multiple wounds, probably some kind of shrapnel. So as we've been taking the bones of this 20th body out, we did find an identification tag, but it's not German. So we're gonna have to figure out what country that's from, because I don't know off by heart, just by seeing it like this. There was also a strange looking badge on the arm that didn't look German to me. So this might be somebody from one of the Axis countries. So this here is the 21st body found in the grave, and this is the one that shows how brutal war is. Pretty much the best of all the bodies we've seen so far. Because here you have the two legs that are cut off very high. You have the backbone going up a bit. There's no head where the head should be. You see there's a shoe and the tibia. There's some arm bones that are fractured, lots of small fragments of bones. So basically this soldier was completely blown to pieces. And interesting, we found lots of pieces of shelter quarter, so they must have put him in his shelter quarter, his tent, to carry him around before burying him. Now we've made a quick field reconstruction of body 22, which was completely smashed. And yeah, there's a few pieces of skull that are remaining. Both clavicles are there, most of the ribs are there, though they're all smashed. I didn't try to put them into position. The left arm is partly there, the right arm is completely missing. This area is more or less intact, though both legs are severely fractured. The right leg is mostly present, and the left leg is completely gone. And then these are just random fragments that I didn't even try to put back because we're just doing this quickly in the field. We're now digging up body number 22. We just found his identification tag in place. It's still readable. And we already see that he has both lower legs fractured. Also fractures here of the left femur. And we'll see what else we can find as we excavate. We're finished excavating body number 22 now. We saw previously he had his identification tag around his chest. His skull is broken into multiple pieces. We can't really make sense out of it here in the field because we don't have time to build it back. We did, however, see that there were quite a few shrapnel fragments in his body. And there's a fracture here of the right femur at the bottom. Then there's a fracture of the right tibia also at the bottom. And a fracture of the left tibia. There's still one shoe left over. The Germans probably left it there because it was covered with blood or something, or maybe even damaged. Otherwise they would have taken it off like they did for the other bodies. This is the 23rd body found in this cemetery. This one had a fractured skull. It was hard to see if it was done by our machine or if it was an old fracture, but parts of them seem to be old, and right beside the skull there was this fragment of shrapnel, so that might be a cause of death. You can also see that the right humerus is severely fractured, and he has his identification tag, which is perfectly readable, from a pioneer battalion. Other than that, there's nothing particular to be seen on the body. The legs are intact, the rest is intact. This is the right humerus once it's been taken out of the ground, and the lower parts fit together well, but here there's small fragments, and part of it is missing. So that's obviously an impact area, probably from a fragment of shrapnel. This is the 24th body now, and we've just found his identification tag on his chest where it should be. Looks like one made of zinc, which will make it a bit harder to read, but there's still a piece of string there, a piece of leather attached to it. This is the 24th body. So apart from the identification tag, we've also found a couple of fragments of shrapnel with the body. There was one in this area, one in this area, and the skull is completely smashed, and it's not our excavator that did that, so he must have been severely wounded in the head and must have died immediately. This is the skull of the 24th body once it's taken out of the ground, and we're going to try to quickly rebuild it here on site to see if we can conclude anything. We're quickly trying to reglue it here in the field to see if there's any wounds on it. Of course it's not as good as being in the lab, but as you can see, we're getting some results. We'll see in a few more minutes what it looks like. We've spent about an hour trying to fix the skull of body number 24, which was completely smashed as you saw before, and it's been pretty successful. It's not perfect. This is the jaw that was broken, and it has what looks like a shrapnel hit here where the chin would have been. This is the upper jaw that has a freshly broken tooth, which could perhaps be related to the death. And then this is the most interesting, the actual skull itself. So this is looking from the left side. We didn't reconstruct the face because that would take a long time, but as you can see we don't have to, because there's a very obvious impact here and on the left side with the kind of radiating fractures that radiate out of this central impact. And then if we look at the other side, it looks like there's a small exit hole. That could just be by chance, I don't know, it might be a fragment of bone that broke off on its own, or it could be a fragment that exited on that side there. So that's about 1 hour of work, and it confirms a cause of death from shrapnel wounds. This is the 25th and last body, and we're just having fun cleaning off the coffin here so that we can see what it looked like at the time. Most of it rotted away, but quite a bit of it is still visible. In total, 14 of the 25 bodies here were in coffins. Probably the 14 first that were buried. This is the last body of the 25, and we kind of had a bad feeling about him when we noticed that the feet down here are about 30 centimeters from the bottom of the coffin. So that means he's buried really high up in the coffin, and that impression was confirmed because, as you can see, all the legs are intact, but then as of the thoracic area, the whole body is missing. There's no chest, there's no head, there's no arms. So the guy is, there's just actually a half a body in here. So he must have been hit by a shaller. Anyway, something violent happened to him. The coffin is also very well preserved. So you can see he's in the middle of the coffin, about 30 centimeters on each side, from the feet and from the head. So there's only half a body, and we also noticed that there were buttons and parts of shelter quarters. So this is another body that was transported in his shelter quarter before being buried.